What's up, guys? So today we're here at my buddy's place. We'll talk about that in a second. But we're here doing a podcast with a friend of mine named Paul Hogan. He is part of a group. Him and a few of his friends and coworkers. They run a organization called Jiu-Jitsu, and they did a seminar at my gym where basically it's law enforcement teaching other law enforcement about jiu-jitsu because they're big on, as we'll talk about in just a bit on the podcast, bringing jiu-jitsu to law enforcement because of the benefits of it, right? Obviously, we all just know this. It's a good thing to have jiu-jitsu if you're a person that's in law enforcement. I actually got called, strangely enough, Eugene, I got called a bootlicker for this one.
A bootlicker?
Bootlicker, yeah. I had to look it up. I have never been called a bootlicker. I've been called a lot of things.
What does that mean?
So bootlickers just means like I'm just sort of licking the boots of cops or whatever, because the authority figures, right? I had to look it up. I didn't know.
Like a butt kisser, like a
kiss? That kind of stuff.
Like you're sucking up to it,
right? Exactly,
like a teacher's pet,
right? But for me, like it's funny because I asked the guy, I'm like, how do you mean bootlicker? Because I just like, tell me more about what you mean, because I'm genuinely curious. Like, why do you think this? Of course, he didn't message me back because it's on an anonymous profile. But I always think it's interesting where we see this, like we a lot of us agree that cops need more training. That's a thing that's there, right?
Sure.
So now we have guys that are taking the time out because they're literally for free coming out there doing the seminar. I'm like, hey, bring it out there to my gym. Absolutely do it. Like trying to support the situation, trying to make things better within the system. And you get called a bootlicker. So, but that's the internet for you, isn't it? Right.
Yeah.
So
you get a little bit of everything on the internet.
That's right. Well, you just get people on the internet that can just talk trash and there's no repercussions, right? Because the person would not call me that to my face.
Not if they don't want to get handled on the mats.
Well, I wouldn't handle them. I just probably would you need to leave. Like it would be that.
That's the best
I wouldn't
scenario.
even waste my energy because for me to waste my energy on them, like my time is important.
It is.
I would rather just have them leave.
There you go.
They're not worth my time.
It's a great point.
Literally not worth it. Anyway, I don't know why I'm talking about that with you guys, but I thought that was interesting. I got called a bootlicker. It's a new one for me. Anyway, on to the actual the podcast in just a minute. And before we do, we're going to thank our sponsors. What was the button? So Rob's got these buttons here at this place that I've been fiddling around with them. Eugene's he's like, stop pressing the buttons. I can't help myself pressing the buttons. First off, guys, Charlotte's Web. If you guys want to get yourself some CBD to try it out to see if you experience some of the positive benefits that a lot of us talk about. I know that a lot of times when you listen to people promoting CBD, it's almost sounds like some snake oil salesman from like the turn of the 1900s. But it's really interesting stuff. And again, I've been on and off of it before. I've got on it and used it, saw a lot of benefits for my ability to train, sleep, everything else, and then went off of it to see if there was any effect. And I noticed that a lot of times when I got off of it, some of those benefits went away. So I'm a big fan of it. And I try to get people to try it out. Like a lot of my students, I'll give them samples and things like that to see if it works for them. And I'll say that it works for a lot of them. It doesn't work for everybody. Some people get it and they don't really feel any effects. Some people get it and they're like, dude, this is amazing. I've got to get more of it. So again, try it out. I know you guys, if you listen to the podcast, you hear this every episode. But again, go to charlottesweb.com, use a promo code Jiu-Jitsu, and pick out yourself one of the products that you'd like to try. If I can give you a recommendation, I really like the Sleep Bug Gummies. The mixture of CBD with the melatonin is amazing for it. I enjoy it for helping my sleep. And so again, if you want to check that out, go there and just, again, get a month's supply, see what you feel, see if you notice a benefit from it and kind of go from there. Epic Roll. Obviously you guys probably at this point, will this be released after the Matt podcast?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So Matt was on the podcast recently. He came down, actually trained with us, had a great time meeting the dude. Great dude. And again, I'm still a big fan of his stuff. He makes cool designs that are chill enough for you to wear, whether you're like at a jiu-jitsu function or not. It's not like one of those things where you can't wear for instance, like with my jiu-jitsu shirts, even my Derby City shirts, they're just very simple designs. And I have people that have I literally have pictures of guys like proposing to their wives in like Derby City shirts or jiu-jitsu shirts, right? Because it's just a shirt you can wear around. And it's the same thing with a lot of the Epic Roll stuff. It's very chill stuff where you can wear it at any sort of situation. And again, they've got rash guards, gis, hoodies. I mean, any sort of jiu-jitsu apparel you want to check out. You can go to epicrollbjj.com, use a promo code Jiu-Jitsu, save 15% on the order. And if you want to support the podcast directly, you can head on over to patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. And you can jump in there. We have 2 tiers right now. I've got 2 tiers. I'll explain them for you real quick. The first tier will give you access to a ton of different content, hundreds and hundreds of content, pieces of content, everything from back-end episodes of the podcast that we haven't released, obviously publicly, little mini interviews with the guests. We have warm-up videos. There's a seminar video. There's some rolling videos with me and Chad on there. There's a workout video with me and Joe doing a leg day. There's a ton of stuff. And then the second tier is all that I just said. Plus, on Sundays, I do a meetup live where basically I get on Zoom and I just hang out with people and chat and answer questions and just kind of bullshit with people. So if you actually want to talk to me directly, that would probably be the best way, unless you plan to come to my gym, which a lot of you guys are not going to do right now because of COVID. So again, if you'd like to come chat with me, that would be the next best way. And that's the second tier. So check that out at patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. And by the way, we are at the Speakeasy Podcast. Well, we're here. It's called the Speakeasy Podcast Network, but we're here at the Speakeasy Podcast, their actual location. I just want to press the button.
Yay.
I just wanted to press the button. Yeah, we're here.
It's
What's
clap-worthy.
that?
Very much is clap-worthy, too.
It was.
So, I don't know about that one.
Hey,
we're here with Rob, by the way.
Yeah,
Rob is one of the guys from the gym, actually, and I always talk about Rob on the podcast because he's kind of an ass. No, I'm kidding. No, he's great. He's one of my toughest training partners. Rob's a great dude, and he was nice enough to let us check out the podcast studio today. Rob, what do you guys offer here at the studio?
So we kind of do a lot here. And first off, I appreciate you guys coming out here because you've definitely been one of the influences and some of the people I've been reaching out when me and my partners have been building out this place. So my background is marketing. The partners that I work with, their background is marketing. We own a marketing company called the Wayne Media Group. We mostly help out small businesses to growing businesses, boost their image, help with their advertising, increase their presence on the internet. So we were also helping. We have a couple of our own podcasts. One of them is More Than Marketing. You should check it out, especially if you're a small business owner. But we were helping a couple clients out with just kind of editing their podcast, because if you can speak on it, it takes time.
It's like doing it like remotely.
Yeah. Yep. We were helping kind of consult them, getting them set up with gear, and then they transfer their files to us via Dropbox or whatever is typically easier for them.
Gotcha.
And then we do the intros, outros, advertising, everything like that for them. So we realize that, especially for businesses, that this is right now, podcasting is king. Audio's taking over. Mm-hmm. Search engines love it. Anytime you're trying to be found, there's a good thing. You're doing a podcast, not just to talk, but it's helping gain exposure in a lot of ways.
Sure.
So that's the same for businesses. It's the same for entrepreneurs. It's the same for hobbyists, but it is time consuming. And 90% of people who say that they stopped listening to a podcast is because of the editing, and it's because of the audio. So what we do is you simply come into our studio. We do have a mobile podcasting tier that we're introducing as well, so we'll come on location. You simply come up with your show. You figure out who's going to be on your show. We can help consult with that. We can help consult with the social media too. But we hit the record button, both the video, the audio. You send your message out, hand it off to us, and then we take care of everything in the background.
Nice.
So we distribute it. We put it across all the different platforms you want. Intros, outros. We'll work in your introduction. If you're talking, the song that's going to go on there. We'll work your advertising, and if that's recorded separately. And then as you start to build up traction too, because of our experience with digital advertising, we can help you get the proper advertisers on your show that we've already networked with. And we can also get you a pretty competitive and good rate for that advertising, because we're able to, use our knowledge and our skills to say, hey, we're selling much more than just a 30-second spot on an audio clip. You're getting backlinking, you're getting mentions, you're getting everything like this across various different platforms. Mm-hmm. So we have some leverage with that. Then on top of that too, we can also help with the marketing side of things. We've even developed websites for people who, specific to their podcast, which is a good, area to host it on.
For sure.
So basically, if you are a business owner, a representative, an entrepreneur, or a hobbyist who, at least wants to try out this realm, but you recognize the value of your time and you recognize that, hey, there's a lot of work that goes on in the background, come check us out.
Yeah, and to that effect, I have spent years probably Chewy and I have been doing the podcast for 2 years, and I did a podcast on my own for 2 years before that. It's a lot of learning that goes into a lot of time. So if you don't have the time, somebody has the knowledge of how to get this across all platforms to multiple people, get the most out of your time. You guys do that. So that's
exactly
I
right.
can say that, that it takes a lot off your plate. So,
I mean, if like you and I didn't do it together and I wanted to do a podcast, I would do something like that.
yeah, for sure.
Because it's just, I don't have the time to learn everything that has to go with all the ins and the outs and
It's a
everything else.
lot.
Because I mean, like what you do is like all the chords and everything else to the actual editing, every bit of it.
Yeah,
man,
we do the
it's
gritty.
done.
We do the gritty work. I like to say this. It's an interesting comparison, but it's so true. Some people want to cut their grass and trim their hedges and make their yard look absolutely beautiful, and then some people want to hire landscapers
I'm that
to
dude.
do that.
For sure.
So if you're looking for a landscaper for your podcast, then we can do it.
And did you mention the website address yet?
Nope, I haven't. So if you want to find us, you can visit us, Speakeasy Podcast Network, through our social media accounts, both Instagram and Facebook. You can also go to our website. It's speakeasynetwork.com. A little bit shorter on that one, speakeasynetwork.com. And I'd love to hear from you. It'd be great if you could reach out if you need our help. So
Thanks,
also
Rob.
too, as far as our locations go, if I can end on this, we have our studio that we're sitting in right now in Louisville, Kentucky. We are opening up a location in Brighton, Michigan, which is kind of between Lansing and Ann Arbor on the main street. So we're really excited about that. And we already have, a number of markets that we're going to get ready to hopefully before 2022 to get into as well.
Nice. And again, I trust Rob. Rob is one of my students, and I know what he's doing behind the scenes, and he's a good dude. So if it's something you're interested in and any of that stuff sound appealing, check him out. And before we get into the podcast, I want to use the button. So let me ask you a question, Rob.
Yes, sir.
So what if you can't spell Armageddon?
Is this a dad joke?
Just answer the question. So what if you can't spell Armageddon?
I don't know.
It's not the end of the world.
Hey.
I got
There
to
you go.
use the drum.
We have the buttons here. You don't have the buttons at home. We have the buttons.
All right, guys. So with all that said and all the buttons pressed, let's get to the podcast with Paul.
I like the polo, by the way.
Like
I'm not a polo kind of guy, but that's nice. Seems like it's comfy.
we started doing these when we started doing like the women's self-defense seminars. We need something a little bit more formal than a rash guard or
Wait, so you do seminars in the polos?
yeah. So if we do like a women's self-defense seminar, like we've done them for like Central Bank and a construction company, they bring in like their female employees. So it's not like full grappling. Like we're just showing you like confident encounters. Like if you see somebody on the street, like walking by, making eye contact and like saying, "Hey, how are you?" Like making them realize you're aware of them. And then a couple little techniques, mainly disengaging techniques, but a couple if you gotta rake the eyes or a groin shot, completely different than when we do our jiu-jitsu ones. Like there's no
Yeah.
actual like rolling and sweating and carrying on, just something to give women a little bit of confidence in their day-to-day lives.
Is there anything that you think it's important for women to like? Because I have women that train jiu-jitsu, and I've seen women that get into jiu-jitsu because of some sort of physical trauma of some sort or some sort of altercation that happened to them. Are there any useful tips for women that say like when they're out and about as a police officer that you know of that would be useful for women, just either things that keep in mind or a certain way to present themselves or anything of that nature?
I would say the biggest thing is being aware of your surroundings. Get your head out of your phone. How you see, and that's, we laugh, but that's what you see now is people walking down the sidewalk, eyeballs
gosh,
down,
bro, it's crazy.
just crossing the street without looking. The thing we were taught when we were 5 years old: look both ways before you cross the street. Light turns green, or they get that crosswalk sign, and they're just texting right across the street.
I mean, dude, people are plugged to their phones constantly.
Yeah.
Like sometimes like when I go to if I go to a coffee shop, which they actually have people going into coffee shops again. I'll go in there, and it's funny because if you get in a line, it's interesting to see people. Same thing at the grocery store. It's interesting to see how people can't just exist
Right.
for a moment in their own head.
Yeah.
As soon as they stop, they're like,
Gotta check Facebook.
gotta check. Just and you want, and I can't help but observe. You'll watch them, and they just scroll. They're not looking at anything. It's not like they're checking this email that they're trying to get back to. They're just scrolling. And then as soon as the line proceeds, they'll put it back in their pocket. Or I'll drive home at night after the gym is done training, and my phone. I had a nightmare one time that I was dying.
Right.
That I got chucked from a car, and I'm not. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, yourself on the.
Okay, it just sounded like it was went down. But I had a nightmare that I got chucked from a car.
Right.
And so I don't check my phone anymore in the car. Just put it in the thing, whatever. But when you drive, you like look around at nighttime and you'll just see this blue glow from people coming out at their laps as they're like driving and not paying attention. But yeah, so not looking at your phone. Okay. So
not looking at your phone. Just being aware. One question that we get a lot, and this isn't saying anything bad about anyone, is the homeless population and begging people for money. And that makes some people uncomfortable. Some of them do get aggressive and are a little bit more demanding. I think especially if they see someone that they perceive as weaker or would be more likely to pass out an extra dollar.
Sure.
And that's where we talk about that confident encounter. Make that eye contact. Make them, the second you see somebody, no matter who it is, just make eye contact. Give them a little head nod. Acknowledge that, hey, I'm aware of you, you're aware of me, and we're still 100 yards away from each other.
Yeah, because if you look at someone and they make direct eye contact and don't avert the gaze, that kind of lets them know. Whereas if if you look at someone and they can't even like look at you
They
like
look
in the
down.
eyes, it's like young children sometimes. They won't make eye contact. They'll kind of like look around and stuff, but they won't look directly in the eyes.
Did you eat that candy bar?
Yeah, right. They won't look at you in the eyes and go, no. Yeah, okay. So
we encourage that. And if you are uncomfortable, cross the street. There's nothing wrong with that. The very easy things to do, that if you feel like you're in an uncomfortable situation or you do have somebody that you feel is following you, just cross the street. There's a million reasons that you may be crossing the street. Something else that I like to kind of add when we go over those segments is, if you seem like, hey, don't I know you from somewhere? You don't, but they don't know that. But even if they know you don't know them, they're going to think, hey, that person can describe me because I look like somebody to them. Right? So if I do something, they're going to be able to tell the police, hey, this guy was 5'8", had a beard. Even if he doesn't look like your friend Brian, you just describe, hey, you look like so-and-so. And that's going to be a deterrent because they don't want to be identified.
Sure.
So if you tell them, hey, I recognize you, again, possibility that somebody's going to back off because now you have identifiable features that you can give.
What do you think about, like, if somebody's really closing the distance and you're like, wait a second, you want to keep space? Like, what do you recommend people do? Like, even like a smaller female or somebody that's even smaller stature that feel like they're, because people like start talking and they start closing the distance, and before you know it, they're like right next to you. So what do you recommend?
Right. So you've got that natural bubble. If you're in a situation where you can take those couple steps back or to the side, moving backwards is always risky no matter the situation. You don't know what's behind you. Something else we encourage, if you can't get on the phone, or if it's not to the point you need to call 911 yet, you're just uncomfortable, right? Just pretend you're on the phone with somebody. You don't want to be staring down text and be like, hey, oh yeah, this guy's walking up to me. Hold on a second. Let me see what he wants. Again, you may not be on the phone. Hopefully your phone doesn't ring in that instance.
or maybe even call a friend or something.
Phone a friend.
Yeah.
Do something. But if it's that quick and you don't necessarily have time to do that, just the second you give somebody the idea that somebody else is going to know what's going on,
that you're not isolated,
right?
Yeah.
They're a lot less likely to partake in whatever they're going to partake in.
Yeah, because I imagine
it's
that criminals
you
are looking for, or people that are going to do that, they're looking for easy prey.
Easy prey.
So it's like, you look at like the way that a large, cat in the African savannah, it waits for the herd to go, and then it picks off one of the ones that ends up by themselves, isolated.
Absolutely.
And that's the one they jump on. They don't jump on the one in the middle of the herd.
Right.
They wait till they're gone. And so, okay, this one's by himself. That's the one I'm getting.
Absolutely. Whether it's somebody walking down the street, or think of most videos you see on the news from gas station robberies. They wait till there's no one in the store. You don't want to go in a situation where you're going to be caught, you're going to be identified, you're going to be overpowered. Nature is nature, like you were talking about. We want the weakest target if we're hunting or we're doing something we're not supposed to do.
The path of least resistance.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Always, it's always the case. So
I mean, everybody does that from from anything really. You're always looking for the path of least resistance, even when we do jiu-jitsu. Like if you're in the middle of you try to grab an arm, the guy's really tucking in, his arm's tight and he can't get to it. You go to the neck then because the neck's exposed.
Right. Yeah. Whether it's jiu-jitsu or, I was driving home from St. Louis. I had to go up there for a case the other day. I'm driving down the road. All of a sudden I had the police department put in on my GPS and said, we found a path that's 8 less minutes. Click it. Okay. If you want it. What did I do? It's 8 minutes, but I clicked okay.
What were you doing in St. Louis?
I had a suspect with some extradition warrants, and we were going there to pick him up because I wanted to interview him before he was actually in jail and knew that we were coming for him.
Okay.
Paul, so for people that don't know who you are, kind of what you do, can you give us just a little background on kind of what your background is with police and everything?
Yeah. So my name's Paul Hogan. I'm a police officer in Kentucky. I've been an officer for just over 11 years now. I spent most of that on patrol, riding the beat. Have done some temporary stints here and there, and just recently permanently went to a position with our Crimes Against Children unit. So everything I do is Crimes Against Children now in a detective unit there. I've been doing jiu-jitsu for just over 10 years. I wrestled for about 13 years before that. And really what got me into jiu-jitsu was when I was wrestling, I grew up in Ohio, very dominant high school wrestling state.
Yeah.
I wasn't a state champ. I was okay. I won a lot more than I lost. And I felt really confident on the ground. I felt like I could handle my own and protect myself and do what I needed to do should it ever come to a self-defense aspect. And then I went to my first jiu-jitsu class right after I got out of the police academy. And I was hitting just gorgeous double legs on people and getting guillotined every single time. Yeah, getting choked out about 5 times. Every single time we're hitting the ground, I'm getting choked out. And so what I realized, that motivated me to get better. Motivated me that, 1, I really don't know anything, and I think this is interesting. I want to learn it. And 2, with the profession I'm going into, and 10, 11 years ago, I need to know more. And while we got good training in the academy, obviously it didn't even prepare me for a day 1 jiu-jitsu class. And so kind of what I've learned is while that motivated me, a lot of times you'll get officers that come in and the second they get beat up like that, they don't come back.
Yep.
So that, and there's really no in between. It either motivates you that you're like, hey, I need to learn more, I need to be better, or like, well, this stuff ain't really going to work in the street. That old, sentiment.
You make some sort of excuse.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is? Why people just don't? Police officers have, and we had Chris Sizemore as one of your training partners and a guy you do jiu-jitsu with.
Yeah.
And is it like that? When you're a police officer, you assert this kind of authority almost. You have to be authoritative. You have to be in control. So when you feel like maybe you're not in control, you just kind of. What's the deal? What do you think the mindset is? Because you are a police officer and you kind of understand police officers probably better than most of us do. What do you think that is that keeps people away from training?
There's a lot that goes into that. We've heard every excuse in the book from money, time, we're underpaid, so we're working overtime. I can, bench press 315 pounds. No one's going to be able to beat me up. Like there's a million different excuses that we have out there. But I, in my personal opinion, I think one of the biggest ones is, like you said, we're supposed to be authoritarian. When we walk into a room, it's our room, right? When we get called to a scene, it's supposed to be our scene. And when you walk into a gym for the first time and even if you're fresh out of the academy and you're a 24-year-old in shape, whatever sport you did in high school or college, and you're a freak athlete, and you get manhandled by somebody half your size, and whether they're putting you in a rear naked choke and armbar, or they're just physically dominating you on the ground to the point you can't move, that's no longer your room,
right?
And that's an ego shot. It is, and I don't want that to sound like I think police are egotistical, but you are trained to have control of a situation. And once you completely lose control to the point you can't even get, I'm 5'5", 155 pounds. Somebody walks in the room that's 300 pounds and has no training. I don't care.
Yeah, you're all over 'em.
I don't care. Yeah, that doesn't bother me. I know that I'm going to be okay as long as it's short of just completely letting them lay on top of me. And once you lose that realm of all of my training has prepared me to be in control, and now I'm completely out of control to the point I'm not going to get out of this situation until this person lets me out of it, I think that deters a lot of people.
You know, I think there's something to the fact that probably, like, let me ask you a question. When you wrestled, how did you do your first year wrestling?
Terrible.
Right, you were terrible, and then by the end of it, like you said, you were doing pretty well. Didn't beat everybody, but you won more than you lost, and you realized what it was. So, like, I had the same experience in wrestling, which pretty much everyone that wrestles has the same experience. Which you come in. You know,
so I started wrestling in 5th grade, but my first actual competition year was 7th grade. Right. So I got into like the biddy program. We did like inner squad meets and all that.
Yeah.
My 7th grade year, I went 2-7. One of those ones was a forfeit.
Okay. Yeah.
So I was 1-7. Yeah.
Yeah. So you were chasing like this one win that you had where you're like, I'm trying to get back to that. And then you got better. And then by the end of your like senior year in high school or whatever it was, you were doing pretty well for yourself.
Yeah.
For me, like when I came into jiu-jitsu, I remember getting smoked by everyone.
Yeah.
Bigger, smaller, didn't matter. I got smoked by everyone. And like you, I thought I was going to come into jiu-jitsu. I thought it was going to be great. I remember coming in and like, double legging someone, getting them on the ground. And I remember putting them in a can opener.
Yeah.
Because at the time, this is 2003, and all the wrestlers and MMA fights were doing can openers. So I was can opening the crap out of everyone. Didn't work to finish them, but they'd armbar me. They'd choke me, everything else. And I remember when I left that class, I was like, I want that.
Yeah.
Because I knew in wrestling where when I went to wrestling, I got smoked by everyone. And then later on, I kind of got, because I surrounded myself with those people, I got some of those powers essentially, right?
Yeah.
I got some of that. And so when I came into jiu-jitsu, it was the same way. Like, okay, like I got smoked by all these people. Fantastic. I want some of that.
Yeah.
I want some of that ability because then I know that if I surround myself with these people, I'm going to be able to get it.
Right.
And I think
it's going to take a while.
It's going to take a while.
Yeah.
100%, but I know I can get it because I wrestled, and I understand it's going to take a few years before I get really anything going, but I like the long-term payoff of that.
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes, it's an ego shot to everyone, but I think sometimes it's like one of those things where people maybe haven't had that experience where they've done wrestling or they've done some one-on-one contact sport where, you had to sort of eat a crappy experience for several years before you got something. Because I think if more people had to go through that, they'd be like, oh, of course, I'm going to go in, I'm going to suck, and then I'm going to get better. And so that's completely acceptable, and so I always wonder if it's like, is it the police officer thing? Like let's say, for instance, if you had like a wrestler police officer like you, are there more wrestler police officers who went to jiu-jitsu and said, oh, I'm not doing this stuff? Or are there more of them that say, ooh, it's just like wrestling. If I do this stuff more, I get better. And I wonder how many people like who just, it's an ego blow, but they haven't really had that experience where you put forth those years of training and practice and you get something out of it that then it's like, okay, cool. I've got it now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I like I said, I'm just, because I always think about that. Is it the ego, or is it they have not experienced the payoff of a one-on-one contact sport before, so they don't even know what they're really getting into?
I think that's a really good point because several of the guys that I do train, even whether they're police officers or not, if you bring a wrestler into a jiu-jitsu room, they almost immediately fall in love with it.
Yeah.
And I think it goes back to that, a lot of us, we're not in the Olympics. We're not, whether you wrestled at college or not, we're kind of past that, and you may be looking for something to get you back to that feeling.
Yeah.
Winning a wrestling tournament, winning a wrestling match is a very unique feeling. You win a state championship football, there's 53 other guys that helped you do that. Wrestling is a team sport, and in essence, you're trying to win team tournaments, but you get on top of that podium at the end of the day.
That's all you.
You did it. Like, you did it, and it's such a unique feeling. And that very well may be part of it. Kind of piggyback on what you were saying, I was talking to one of the guys at the seminar we did at your gym today. Thank you for having us. But he was trying to get somebody else to come with him who wasn't a wrestler, hadn't done the individual sport, but had some success in team sports. Had some pretty good success, it sounded like, in team sports. But he came into the jiu-jitsu gym, was like, man, I suck at this. I don't know if I want to do this. Now, you're coming from a successful athlete.
Yeah.
that had that. And so is it the wrestling aspect that you understand that I'm going to have to fight through this, and every day I'm going to get a little bit better. I may not feel it for a long time, or a lot of athletic careers end after high school.
Yeah.
Right? Very few go on to college, even fewer go on to play professionally. Or are you just that far away from success that you forget how hard you have to work to be successful?
Yeah. I think that the team sport and individual sports are two completely different animals, because I know how bad I felt after losing a wrestling match. Like, I remember losing the first wrestling match. I remember losing a first football game, right, with a team. The football game was like, shucks, right? Like, whatever, like, I mean, again, you share that burden with, tons of other people, but the wrestling one, you're out there by yourself. I was the one looking up at the lights while I'm getting pinned, right? You know what I'm saying? Because remember, it was always like, that was drilled into our head. Never look up at the lights.
You don't want to count lights.
If you count the lights, you're in a bad spot. So I was out there by myself, and I remember there was just something that was like soul wrenching about that, where you're out by yourself, and it really breaks the ego down a little bit, because you're like, it wasn't anybody else. You can't blame it on the backs. You can't blame it on the quarterback. You can't blame it on the lineman. It's on you. Yep. And I think that and that's why I think individual sports are so powerful. It doesn't matter the one. I think just individual sports where it's all on you, one way or the other. And I think that those are, and in the combat sports too, because of the physical nature of them, whether it be boxing, jiu-jitsu, wrestling, any of it, I think it's just such a more powerful thing because of the fact that you can't blame it on anybody else. And you get that direct correlation of, I did this, I win. But also, again, granted, sometimes the egos sort of reemerge later on, but there tends to be this sort of humbling of the ego early on, where people sort of accept that, this is just what you got to go through. And so that's why I asked about the wrestling thing, opposed to like just sort of chalking it up as like cops have ego. It's like, well, maybe, but maybe it's also that these guys have never had the experience of going through this one-on-one contact sport and then coming out on the other end and realizing what the benefit is. It's like someone, for instance, like I'm dieting right now.
Right.
I'm leaning out for a competition. I started doing this because I just wanted to, for vanity's sake, I wanted to be lighter. I just wanted to look sexy with my clothes off. Yeah. But it ended up being competition coming up, so I'm gonna be 202. I'm gonna be down a weight class. Well, when I'm doing this, like, it really doesn't require all that much discipline, because I know what the end result is. I've dieted before. I know how this works. Like, I've dieted. I'm going to lose some weight. I'm going to be leaner. It's going to look good. I'm going to like it. And I'm going to compete at a lower weight class. I'm going to get in better shape because of it. All these different things are going to be a positive benefit. So I've experienced the end result. Yeah. Very easy. Same thing with training. Like, it doesn't require much discipline to train, because I know the end result. I know that even if I'm tired, I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to feel good afterwards. I'm going to love the way I feel afterwards. There's no discipline needed. I know what the end result is. And so I think sometimes maybe it's just people haven't went through that rite of passage of going through a one-on-one sport where they don't know what's on the other end. And so therefore they just kind of go, just isn't for me, Yeah. Along with the possibility of egos too.
Yeah, I agree with that. And, one of the most early ego checks that I ever got that I can remember was, I told you how terrible I was when I wrestled in 7th grade. 2-7, 1 forfeit. In between 7th and 8th grade, I hit the weight room. I started taking this stuff seriously. We had a really bad snowstorm up in northern Ohio, so a lot of our season got canceled. So I started the whole year, but only had 13 matches. And I think I went like 10-3 or something like that. So I went from 2-7 with a forfeit to all of a sudden I'm winning, 80-90% of my matches, except for one. I was up 7-2 with like about 30 seconds left. And I took a breath. Oh, yeah. And I got cradled and I got stuck. Only time I was pinned all year. We lose the meet by 1 point. So next day in practice, we're getting smoked because we lost a match we shouldn't have lost. And my coach, who I loved, was a great coach, is like, Hogan doesn't blow a 7-2 lead with 30 seconds left, we win. I was like, yeah, I was thinking about me in that second and how tired I was, and I needed that breath. Yeah. And it cost me, but then I'm like, okay, so yeah, it's still a team sport. I cost all these other guys, and now they're suffering for me because I took a selfish act and dropped my knee when I shouldn't have, and here we are. So, you get that team aspect of it, and then it still goes to the individual side where you gotta have that focus, which can help you out with the mental toughness later in life.
Yeah, I think getting people like Chewy, you were talking about getting people to the other side of it. You see this like humbling experience of wrestling or whatever, jiu-jitsu even, get this humbling experience of being manhandled and just completely feeling helpless. But then you realize it's just like you talk about drops in the bucket. You put a little bit in, a little bit more, and all of a sudden, now you're a little better. You're able to hold your own. Now you're not getting submitted all the time. So it's just, and then you get your first submission, for example. I remember hitting my first submission as a white belt. I was like, oh shit, like this works. Like I'm not getting crushed, and I didn't have any wrestling experience.
Right.
And I always played team sport. So for me, it was just like, I just stuck with it. I don't know why I did. I just kept showing up. But like, I think if you can somehow help people get to that other side where they can see the benefit, where they can see just, especially in a life or death situation like you guys deal with a lot, the outcome and the circumstance are so serious, right? So I think like getting people to that other side is very powerful. And like I think you guys probably do a really great job by setting up an environment like a seminar for police officers only.
Yeah. That
what it does is like, hey, we're all on the same team here, right?
Right.
We're all doing the same thing. We're all working towards the same thing. And I think it sets up an environment where like it's kind of more safe, right? It's not like, oh man, I whooped this cop's ass or this, it's just like everybody's together and plus you guys are there and you can correlate your relationship directly correlates with what they feel and what they're going through.
Yeah. And that's a big part of why we limit our seminars to law enforcement only. Can everyone benefit from seminars? Absolutely.
100%, yeah.
But our goal with Blue Jitsu is to get as many officers exposed to Jiu-Jitsu as we can and make them, and not only the officer, but the public that we're interacting with, safer.
Mm-hmm.
And even going back to when I very first started policing, I was a very fresh white belt. I mean, I started Jiu-Jitsu when I got out of the police academy. So I don't have any real Jiu-Jitsu experience. I've got my wrestling with a little bit of grappling on top of it. And again, with my size, I get tested a lot more on the streets than, you guys know my buddy Ichiro.
Yeah.
This big athletic freak.
He's a big monster.
Very few people just looking at him, not knowing his background, are even going to test him.
Yeah, I mean, the dude played like college ball, didn't he?
Yeah, he played college football, and he's, I don't even, 6'2", probably 6'3", and 220, and faster than I am. Like, he has every trait you could ever want as an athlete. Very few people are going to test him. Mm-hmm. You look at me, 5'5", 155 pounds, and people are like, maybe I can get away from him. Like, I don't know, but, I'm going to take a chance at him versus Ichiro. Yeah. And even with the little experience I had coming out early on, and even to where I'm at now, obviously I've been training for a long time, I've never had to physically strike anybody. I've never thrown a punch. I've never thrown an elbow kick. And my mindset is now, early on I relied a lot on my wrestling with a little bit of jiu-jitsu I had on top of it. Now I rely more on my jiu-jitsu. And if I have to go into a wrestling aspect of it, if my body lock doesn't work, I have to drop to a single leg. Okay, no big deal. But I'm just going to hold you down till the cavalry gets there. Mm-hmm. I'm just going to hold you down and control you and make sure you're not grabbing anything that I have and you're not reaching for anything that you have. And luckily, I've always worked in an environment where I know I've got beat partners. They're going to be there within a minute or two. You get down to some rural counties, that's not as applicable. But with where I've been, if I punch you and I break my hand, now I'm out of work for 6 months and you're going to the hospital, and it doesn't do anyone any good.
Right.
But if I can just get you down and hold you there, that's going to be beneficial. And that's what we want with jiu-jitsu, is making this force that we're using more effective than sitting there and punching somebody in the face and just making a mess. And then they punch you in the face, and now videos are everywhere of just this giant brawl.
Right. And that's the thing too, is I think it's the ability to apply force in such a controlled manner. Even like if you go back and watch some of the Gracie in action videos, granted, some of it, it's like it's almost like jiu-jitsu propaganda, which right. I'm kind of okay with, because I'm glad they spread it, right? But Hogan would say it was the more humane way of fighting. Yeah. Like, you could literally fight a guy without having to throw a punch.
Absolutely.
We were talking to several guests on who have won the EBI combat jiu-jitsu, where they are allowed to like throw like palm strikes and stuff like that. And the guys so they had some guys that have won it without throwing a punch. So they're able to, throw a strike. So even though someone's trying to strike them, they're able to control this person, beat them without having to throw a punch.
Yeah. You look at even going up to like Damian Maia,
Yeah.
who is a UFC fighter, throws a very low volume of punches.
Yep.
And he has said, if I'm striking, it's to set up my jiu-jitsu.
Right.
Yeah.
And so exactly right. And you know, even like in wrestling, I remember we used to say it was kind of like a fight without punches.
Yeah.
I mean, because you're going, but I mean, it's a fight, but you're not punching each other.
Right.
But I think that for me, looking at it, because I don't have like an anti-cop sentiment, because I have a lot of police officers that train in my gym that are like you, where they have been in situations where if by the rules of the use of force that are presented to them, they could have used a weapon.
Yeah.
But they chose not to because they were physically confident to say, you know what, I got this. You know, I've got this. We're not going there. I don't need that. I've got this. I've had students who were in situations like we were talking about before the podcast, where there was one where this guy had a knife drawn. And he's, the cops have their guns drawn, and they're like, drop the knife. And the guy's kind of inching forward. And, my student who, he was a devout Christian, and, his mission of being a police officer was to make things better.
Right.
Right. He's not there to like be whatever it is that, I don't know, but he was there to make things better. And so he was like, I felt like I wanted to save that guy. I don't want that guy to die in front of me. So he runs over across from the guy, because he's coming from the side, grabs the guy, like his arm that's armed with a knife, jacks him up in a Kimura, removes the knife, and they cuff him. And he was like, I saved the dude's life. He doesn't even know it, because he was still going forward. He was using drugs and stuff like that. He just didn't want him to die. He didn't want the guy to die. So I think that you have this ability to control things where, again, like most of you guys that are out there are trying to do good stuff. And I think it's just such a good thing, because, there are times where when you watch there are videos where they're hard to watch, like where I'll see one, like, like where it's like, you could have just, if you had more physical confidence, you could have just went up there and grabbed the dude. You could have taken care of it. You didn't have to go to that point. And I think that what you guys are doing is a really good thing, because it's spreading that message to more and more people, and getting them, like you said, in a place where you're around other people that are doing the thing that you're doing. And so maybe if it didn't take earlier, because most people have heard of jiu-jitsu by now,
Right.
But if it didn't take now you're training in a big group of people who are telling you, bro, you need to do this for work, right? It's going to make things better. So I think it's a good thing to develop that, both like the skills and also that physical confidence.
And so then what we try and do in our seminars is we take essentially 3 techniques and break it down into about 6. We kind of baby step it. But we always start standing, right? Just like you would if you encountered a police officer on the street, not necessarily getting pulled over, or even if you are pulled over and they ask you to step out of the car, we're going to start standing. And if you watch any video or you have any knowledge of any fight at all, every fight's going to hit the ground. At some point, every fight's going to hit the ground. So we like to show a takedown. Okay, now once we've got this basic takedown, we do a lot of body lock stuff. Anyone in the world can do a body lock. We're not asking you to drop down, change levels, hit doubles, all that. Here's how we're going to control you on the ground. And then the last part is always, here's how we're going to move to handcuffing from this position. And we drill step 1, step 2, step 3. And at the end, we're like, okay, now drill it all together. And all of a sudden, people realize, well, this all changed. Like every spot we're landing is putting us in position for the next spot. And they're all jiu-jitsu based techniques.
Right.
And, it goes back to that concept of chain grappling and chain wrestling. Like, you do it in your matches, you do it in your match, I do it in mine. Like we're doing techniques to set up our next technique. And we want officers to be doing that same thing when we do have to go hands-on. Know what you're going to do next. Because if you don't know what you're going to do next, the second that next thing happens is when the bad stuff can happen, because now you're thinking, now you're pausing, and now we're getting into these scrambles, or we're reaching and pulling and grabbing and punching and all the stuff that we don't need to do if we just have a plan.
Right.
You're not reacting. I mean, you're more like anticipating. You know what's coming next. And we've all been in matches before where like you're just constantly feel like you're behind. It's like, oh, okay, I'm catching up, and then you're just a step behind every time. So it just makes it kind of, you almost know what the person's going to do before they do it, because you anticipate their reactions or responses are going to be.
The way I describe jiu-jitsu is proactively reactive. I'm setting something up to make you move a certain way, and then I'm going to react to that.
Sure.
So it's not like a defensive reaction where, like you were talking, Eugene, that you're a second behind. I'm reacting to what you're doing because I forced you to move a certain way. So my proactivity has forced you to start to belly down, so now I'm going to go to like a back knee ride or something like that.
So what would you do? Like, so somebody goes to your seminar.
Right.
Never done jiu-jitsu. They're learning these techniques. Now what do they do to follow up? What do you recommend? Like, hey, let's ingrain these techniques into part of your muscle memory, part of what you do, who you are. so you can incorporate this into, into everyday life. Like, I think it's a hard thing. We've all gone to seminars and like, oh shit, I learned like 100 techniques, 100 things. If they can just walk away with something or some like nugget of information they can incorporate, like how do you suggest like officers do that go to your seminar?
What we like to suggest is find a gym wherever you came from and train, once a week, twice a week. Like, I think to a T, if you talk to other officers in the industry, we're not the only ones putting out a program like Jiu-Jitsu. There's other groups out there nationwide that are trying to just get more officers exposed to Jiu-Jitsu. And kind of, we think if you get 6 to 8 months of consistent training in, you're going to be better than 95% of the people out there. And you're going to be a lot better suited to do your job. Obviously, continuously training after that is better. If you can continue to train, year round. But that's what it comes down to, is it's a diminishable skill.
Sure.
It's just like shooting. Shooting is a diminishable skill. If you don't go out there and practice, if you don't practice driving, like anything that involves eye-hand coordination and reaction time and all that is diminishable. And the best way to do it is just to stay proficient at it, is just to do it. And that's the biggest thing we push. And, we had 24, 25 people at the seminar today. If 3 of them go back home and join a gym and permanently do it, that's a win. That's a huge win for us.
Do you think the best way is just from the top down, like having, the people at the top like mandated? Is that something that you see could be, with everything that's gone on? We don't have to go into details of everything that's gone on. Everybody's aware. Like, do you think that's, there's been a lot of law changes, like in New York, there's that one law where you can't put pressure on someone's diaphragm or their chest or whatever. So like you can't restrict their breathing. That seems, to all us jiu-jitsu people, it seems like we're going backwards here. We're going the wrong direction.
I think that's a huge step back.
So what do we do? Like, how do you try to educate, first of all, your superiors, and then the government or whoever is, passing these laws to get it going in the right direction? How do you educate these people to get it going? Because that's, if you mandate it, which unfortunately is, something you would have to, I feel like that would increase the compliance of it. But like, how do you go about educating? Like, is there numbers, statistics?
There are. We all know there's numbers and statistics. We were talking a little bit off air about some stuff, but if you look at the number of encounters that officers have that involve use of force at all, you're talking about tenths of a percentage in overall encounters. And then if you look at ones that turn bad, that's even less. So we've started a grappling club at our police department is one way that we're trying to make that change. It's, before everything was shut down, we were meeting on Tuesdays, and it's only officers at our agency go to the gym. And we were treating it more as like an actual jiu-jitsu class and not a defensive tactics class. Just come see what jiu-jitsu is. And we had guys join the gym just based off of that. It was obviously free to the department.
Yeah.
And so we had some supervisors that we had to go in there and talk to them, be like, this is what we want to do and these are the benefits. And they started to buy into that. And we are, within the last 2 years, I think, we've transitioned to teaching all of our new recruits a jiu-jitsu based defensive tactics kind of core in the academy. Now we have decades of police officers before that are still working that don't have that. So they get a little bit in they get 8 hours of it in our training each year. Yeah. But you're getting 8 hours over a 20-year career once a year.
Yeah,
the 3 of us know that's not going to do anything.
Yeah, just like you said, it's like going to the range once a year, and then you're not going to be able to shoot that gun anywhere.
Right. And so how we make that education is, we're trying to put together presentations that say, hey, these are the techniques that we think work, and we're taking out your chokeholds or neck restraints, however you want to refer to them, depending on how much training you have. We're taking out slams, we're not picking people up and slamming them down. We're doing controlled takedowns. We're not teaching any submissions. We're teaching variations on submissions that just come into compliance holds and things like that.
Kimura to lock them in place. And
right.
Things like that.
Yeah. If you get that Kimura grip, you can control somebody with just that grip, and you don't even have to finish the technique.
Oh, yeah. I teach I teach kids. Well, I don't teach them as much now, but my coaches do, and I used to do it all the time. We would teach things like Americanas, like key locks, and it locks the shoulder in place.
Right.
And, to get them to where the kid that they're going against has to basically say uncle and back off because, I mean, you can feel it. And it's one of these things where perception wise, it doesn't look like you're doing much of anything, but beneath the surface is like you're getting ready to rip their shoulder off. Like, I mean, and you could potentially render them with a life altering injury, which I think is interesting when you look at the perception versus what the reality is sometimes with these situations. But yeah.
So we've even gone as far as in the curriculum that we're coming up with is we teach very little. We almost teach mount as if you end up in mount, here's what it is, and here's how we're going to transition off of it. Just because, again, we all know you can sit in mount forever and do no damage, but the argument to positional asphyxiation is there. Right. Kind of going back to New York is, you're sitting on somebody's diaphragm, you're sitting on their abdomen. You're going to be okay. But the argument and the perception is there. Whereas if you just transition to a low knee on belly or a side control, all of a sudden it doesn't look like you're doing anything when you're getting the same goal. The same goal is being done. You're holding that person down. You're controlling them. So we teach, hey, if you end up in mount, here it is. Here's how we can transition to mount. But we're going to come off of it so that we can't even have this argument. We're trying to take worst case scenario and remove it.
Yeah, I mean, just as simple as even going like if you end up in mount, going 2-on-1 and try to force them to turn. Yeah. And then, get your gift wrap position or 2-on-1 grip, and then then you have their back and you control them.
Yep. And just giving them those verbal commands every time. If you get in that gift wrap position, hey, just go to your stomach, go to your stomach, go to your stomach. Yep. And verbalizing that. And, that's what I think one of the biggest benefits to training is if you put yourself in that position 1,000 times, then you're not going to be the one screaming at the person to roll over. It's going to be called, hey, go to your stomach. Like, we're done. Go to your stomach. And I love, one thing that I do is I talk to suspects as if we end up in a fight or we end up in a, response to resistance or whatever, I talk to them when we're on the ground. Like, hey, we're done. Like, this is over. What happens from here is entirely up to you. Stop resisting, like go to your stomach. Okay, you want to keep going, then I move to a different position. Okay, like we were done before, now we're like really done. Like what do you want to do now? And if you get in somebody's mind, like we've all had people get in our heads, we've all had opponents get in our heads. If you break somebody mentally, the fight's going to get sucked out of them really quick. Yeah. And that goes back to not having to strike somebody. If I can win the mental warfare, I'm going to be fine.
Yeah, it's interesting. When you said that, I was thinking about one of my students, who's a couple of them actually, where they've had situations where they've gotten into scuffles with a guy, for whatever reason, and they're able to just control the situation so well, and that like later on, like one of them, for instance, it takes the guy to the hospital, because he's got like a little gash because they were basically grappling on concrete. Right. Takes him to the hospital, get him checked in. And, the dude's kind of coming down from whatever he was on. And he looks at him. He says, hey, man, sorry about that. And I appreciate you. Like, whatever. Like, basically, like, because, again, it's like, bad situations happen and people do dumb things and make mistakes. But, it's one of those things where I've talked to several of my police officer students who, because of the way that they conduct themselves, like you said, they don't have to scream. They're in control of the situation. Like, even one of them, I was asking him about different situations from things that I saw because I didn't understand. And this is the thing too. Is like I'm not a police officer. I'm a grappler, I'm a jiu-jitsu guy. But like when I see things, when I saw a video, for instance, of like George Floyd, I'm like, I don't know what I'm watching. Like, why are they doing these things? And hey, can you explain this to me? Because I want to know. And you are a police officer. You are in that realm. Me trying to look at it, it doesn't look good. But can you tell me more about it? Because to me, it's like looking at jiu-jitsu where if you don't know what you're looking at, like jiu-jitsu might be like, oh, they're just rolling around.
My wife still doesn't understand tournaments when we go to.
Right. Like, is he winning? But even then, like you think about jiu-jitsu, it might look like, oh, they're just kind of like rolling around. And it's like, well, that dude's about to rip their shoulder off. Or even I have with our kids students, we'll do a day where we have the parents come out and do the moves and the shrimps and the rolls and everything else, because I want them to understand what their kids are doing, because it doesn't look like much. Right. But just doing the shrimps, like the parents are flopping around all over the place. I'm like, it's harder than it looks.
It's one of the hardest techniques to teach them.
Right. So that sort of thing. But to go back to it, like with that, like he was saying, like to him, one of the students I'm talking about, he said, when I get a guy down to the ground, I basically have the wherewithal to say, hey, back off, I got this. Just back out. Like, we don't need 3 people. I got this. I'm good. I've got the guy under control. And so, again, kind of going back to what you guys are doing and the mission that you guys have, I think it's so important because, I think it's easier for, we can have laws pushed on people and tell people what to do, but I think it's much more palatable to people when it comes from people that are within those groups, saying, hey, listen, this is a really good thing. You guys need to do this stuff, and encouraging that because, like I said, I've spoken to innumerable amounts of police officers who have said that train jiu-jitsu where their jiu-jitsu makes them safer.
Yeah.
It makes the people around them safer. It makes even the people that they're apprehending safer because of what they can do.
And, to your point where you're talking about having the wherewithal to tell people back off and get, whatever, I got it. I was recently assisting some other officers that were in a foot pursuit of a guy on drugs. I forget what the exact call was. I just happened to be in the area when all this was happening. Jump out of my car and people start pointing me to the way the guy was running. And so I've essentially run 2 blocks just to get where he was running from. Now I've run 2 more blocks chasing this guy who's already 100 yards ahead of me. And we end up kind of pinning him down in a parking lot and get him on the ground. And at this point, we've all been running a long way in 30 pounds of gear. Some people are getting tired. I'm tired and I'm in pretty good shape. But the guy was still kind of resisting a little bit, but nothing that I felt was going to amount to much of anything. Mm-hmm. He was gassed. We were gassed. He still doesn't want to go to jail. So we're, still kind of tussling around. And I was like, I'm going to tase you. I'm going to tase you. Now keep in mind, I'm like on top of this guy. And I'm like, no, you're not. Because I don't want to get hit. Yeah. Number one. And number 2, at this point, I'm like, I've got him. Like, are we, it comes back to what you said earlier. Are we justified in tasing him? Yes, we were. But I was like, I've got him. I've got one arm in a handcuff. I'm reaching. I'm like, no, we don't need to do that right now. Mm-hmm. Got him handcuffed, get him in the car. Everything's fine. Save a lot of paperwork and, questions on one end. Save this guy from getting tased, and everyone goes home happy. But that comes back to my training, and even tired, I'm being able to slow my brain down to the fact I'm like, I'm pretty sure this is over at this point. He's still going to tussle and do his thing because that's what he's going to do regardless of the situation. But we don't need to escalate it, even though it may be justified.
Well, there's a perfect point. Jiu-jitsu, the mental aspect of it. I mean, like being fatigued, right? Yeah. Like shit, you're in deep waters. Yeah. You're tired. Somebody's on top of you, and or you're in a scramble. Like, do you have the mental toughness to push a little harder, right? To kind of get to the position where you need to, or are you gonna break under pressure? So. Yeah. I think that's another thing with jiu-jitsu is that mental resiliency you get. And I mean, especially being like, honestly, it's a life or death situation. Like if this person gets on top of you or they're able to take your weapon or whatever, get control of you. I mean, it could be very, very bad quickly. So I mean, it's another point to jiu-jitsu, I think.
And, it goes, one thing that I like to tell people when we're training, especially if we're getting ready for tournaments, like, people want to sit around and I'm like, look, if you quit when you get tired, you're never going to get better. It's what you do in those late rounds in the day that, okay, look, I'm probably not going to sub this guy this round because I'm gassed. But you know what? I'm going to defend and I'm going to keep moving and I'm going to make sure that my technique is on point because that's what's going to keep me safe. Mm-hmm. And training those tired rounds, then for me, correlates on the street. It's like, okay, my adrenaline's through the roof. I've been chasing this guy or fighting this guy. Now I've got to be able to slow it back down. Mm-hmm. And that's when those, like in the UFC, they call them those championship rounds, those late rounds in training, all that, that's what helps me. And that's why I think training, specifically jiu-jitsu or whatever martial art you choose, the mental aspect of it is probably more important than the physical aspect of what you get. The techniques are great. The techniques work. But if you can't control your emotions and control your mind, and go to what we call condition black, where you're just completely unaware of your surroundings, I'm not going to be able to hit a Kimura. I'm not going to be able to apply proper side control because I can't even slow my brain down to think, let alone apply a technique. And that's why I think the mental aspect of training is even better. Yeah,
it's interesting because like you said, going into a situation where, I've seen students before where their first tournament, the guy's literally rolled over, his arms dangling in front of him, and they're so tunnel vision.
Yeah.
So you guys call it condition black.
Condition black. We have tunnel vision. Like, so what we call condition black. So we're set up with different conditions.
Okay.
So condition white is like you're probably in bed, sleeping completely unaware of your surroundings.
Okay.
Right. Condition yellow is kind of fresh air. Like, I don't like to sit with my back to the door at a restaurant.
Sure.
Right. I want to see people coming in. And condition yellow is just kind of the looking around,
Being aware.
Right. Condition red is like, okay, here's a threat. I've identified a threat. I'm zeroed in on this threat. And then condition black is essentially just complete loss of control. You have no idea what's going on anymore.
Okay. So yeah. So like, you have students that'll get out there to situations where their first tournament, they're in a situation where they, things are right in front of them and they can't see it. It might be a move that they normally do. They're not breathing properly. They're just all over the place. And, I think that even for me, like, I haven't been in too many altercations, but just being in the few that I've been in, outside of the gym, I've been relatively calm because I'm so used to being in a stressful situation, like on a regular basis, that it doesn't kick up the same sort of anxiety that I think it would for other people, where this person's in your face and you're just very calm, cool, collected, like, all right, I've got this guy in my face, his fists are clenched, that's not good, like it's like, you can just kind of go look down the list of things going on, and you're just much more aware of what's going on. What made you guys start this Blue Jitsu thing?
So I worked at a different agency in Kentucky before I went to my current one. And so I knew who Chris Sizemore was. It's me, Chris Sizemore, and Sam Ferguson are the three that are behind the Blue Jitsu idea. So when I came to my current agency, I actually met Chris. He was already working there. We started training together. I went up to Chicago in 2012 I was on our accident reconstruction team, and went up to Chicago Northwestern University for some work training, and ended up going over to Carlson Gracie Jr.'s headquarters while I was up in Chicago, and that's where I met Sam. He gave me a very nice visitor's welcome to their gym up there and throttled me. But through jiu-jitsu, we became really good friends.
Yeah.
And, that's kind of the messed up relationship that we have with each other. I hadn't been beat like that by somebody with similar rank to me in a long time, and he knew I was the new guy coming in and
put it on
me. And so we stayed in contact, and I knew he'd been trying to become a police officer in Illinois for a while. And he's like, man, I hate Chicago. I love bourbon, hunting. I want to be a cop. And I was like, buddy, I've got the job for you. Like, come down to Kentucky. Like, so he came down about 4 years ago, got hired on. And then just through training together, the three of us, we're like, man, more officers need to know this. Like, because we had all used it, even without having our jiu-jitsu curriculum, we had all used this stuff whenever we've gotten in encounters at work. It just becomes natural when you get in a hands-on environment to go back to what you know. And what we knew was jiu-jitsu. And so we just kind of got together and we're like, we should look at trying to get more officers involved, trying to get more officers exposed. And so we came up with, actually Chris, I'll give him credit, came up with the Blue Jitsu name. He's like, we should do a seminar, just get some guys to come out and we'll just do like a jiu-jitsu class. I'm like, okay, yeah, that sounds good. And, we tied it to the blue line and Blue Jitsu and all that. So the first seminar that we did actually wasn't defensive tactics based at all. It was just, here's some jiu-jitsu techniques, kind of beginner's level stuff. Here's, we had an idea where we wanted to go with it defensive tactics wise, but we hadn't developed anything yet. And we got some good feedback from it. And the longer we've been doing it and then actually have developed a defensive tactics curriculum that we can work through, and we've stress tested every technique in the curriculum. We've eliminated some stuff. We've had some stuff that we thought were good ideas that were like, this doesn't work under pressure. Or this doesn't work with a belt on or boots on or whatever it may be. And we just kind of ran with it from that first seminar. And here we are. We're about just a little over 2 years into it and growing. We have more people from out of state than in state today for the first time. That was it. Just guys that wanted to expose other officers to jiu-jitsu because we think it can help you, whether it be mentally or physically or hopefully a combination of both.
What was the training like when you went through the police academy? What was the training like? And with your knowledge now, like, what is it really lacking in and what does it need?
So when I originally went through the police academy in 2009, and we used a system that was called PPCT, pressure point control techniques.
I've heard about that.
I
It's
think
funny.
it was
What's that?
It's like pressure point. Like I had
there were 7 different pressure points.
yes, and so a police officer that's been retired that I knew told me about this, and I was like, I tried not to laugh
It's
because I was like, are you serious?
bad.
Like
there's 7 different pressure points.
liver 26, Chewy.
I'll get you into spleen number 5.
All right, sorry.
But
go ahead.
no, you're fine. But no, it was, you got the pressure point under the nose. You've got the pressure point under the jaw. It was, if you have somebody on the ground and they're balled up and they're resisting, just use these pressure points and say, give me your hands. That was the bulk. Yeah. That was the bulk of our training.
So and therein lies the reason why people like they're like sitting here like trying to like poke this guy in his ribs and he doesn't comply, so they just start hammer fisting because like I don't know what else to do.
Right. But if somebody comes up and they give me a pressure point, it's just gonna make me mad.
Yeah, just
right.
piss you off a little bit.
Go back to when the white belt comes in, they start digging your elbow in your thigh.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Like
It
all that means is I'm gonna rip your arm off.
Right.
That it's not gonna make me open my guard at this point. Like it's just gonna piss me off. I'm gonna sweep you and I'm either gonna choke you or rip your arm off or whatever I choose to do at this point because that's just irritating. To think that is a practical control technique when you have somebody resisting arrest is a problem.
Especially when they're probably on drugs.
Yeah,
And like literally they could be tased and still come forward. I mean,
or if you
Or even if they're not on drugs, if they're to the point where they're ready to fight a police officer, they're just in a different state of mind.
yes,
Yeah.
for sure.
you have these things that we're being taught that we don't know any better at the time. And so that's what we're relying on. And then you go out in the street and you're like, oh, will this
doesn't
backfired?
work.
and then you get into that condition black technique where I don't know what else to do. Now they did give a couple, I don't even remember what we had a ground class. But I couldn't even tell you one technique that was in it in 2009. It has slowly, I mean, it might be like one guard pass and just lay on top of them till anyone else gets there kind of thing. But that was the training that we had. And then we did a lot of baton strikes, a lot of working on taser draws. And that was kind of your self-defense. And I'll tell you, in 11 years, I have never hit anybody with my baton. All it's been used for is like poke dead animals out of the road and, knock on some doors with a little bit more bang. Because my fear is if I pull my baton out, I'm bringing a weapon into the occasion in close range. Taser, I can create some distance, right? And baton and taser for us are the same level of force. They're both intermediate weapons, right? It's not striking somebody, but it's not going to our firearms. So those are considered the same level. But my fear always was if I bring my baton out and somehow I lose control of it, I've now introduced a weapon in the scenario. Now, if that guy gets the baton and starts swinging it at me, well, now we're up to a deadly force situation because I brought my baton out.
Yeah.
So I've never used it. I've seen officers that have used it very effectively. When we were doing some training with some newer officers the other day, and we have pads, but I took a baton strike above the pad. You get hit with it, it's going to work. It made me very unhappy and left a nasty welt. But to me, that's introducing a problem to the equation that doesn't need to be introduced.
Doesn't need to be there. Especially because you have the skills to deal without it.
Right. If I'm close range enough to you that I can hit you with a 3-foot baton, I'm close range enough to you that I can body lock you, take you down to the ground, and we can ride it out from there.
Yeah.
Now, again, that's my skill level and not the average, what I'll call the average officer skill level, which is why, again, I think training is very important because you can eliminate a lot of those problems.
So I asked Chris this question. I'm going to ask you as well. Like, how much training, how frequently, what level do you like to see people or do you see officers achieve, you feel like they're pretty effective at handling most situations, on the street?
I think the popular answer is blue belt. But like I said earlier, I think if you get 6 to 8 months, which realistically, if you come in without a wrestling background, say you come out of the police academy, you're in decent shape, 6 to 8 months probably puts you to 2 or 3 stripe white belt.
Yeah.
You know, maybe probably 2 working towards your 3rd.
You're probably going to be a decent white belt where you're kind of middle of the pack as the white belt.
Yeah, you could probably go win a couple local tournaments against other trained people. So if you go out there against somebody that is untrained, I think you're better at that level than probably 95% of who we're going to encounter. Who we're going to encounter as police officers, because a lot of people that we encounter aren't training regularly. They maybe got some street fighting, to their name. Most of what I've seen when I've had these encounters with untrained people are they'll come at you with that big wide haymaker, right? They're just coming over the top, which duck under, get your body lock, go to the ground, and you've completely neutralized 90% of what they're going to do. So I think that 6 to 8 month consistent training, 2 times a week probably for 6 to 8 months, you're good. If your 6 to 8 months is going to 2 seminars in 6 months, then you're still fairly worthless as far as training goes.
Right, because we're not, I talk about this all the time. Jiu-Jitsu is not about knowledge. Like, there's a knowledge portion of it, right? But, like, really, when you're talking about, like, the essence of what you want to gain from Jiu-Jitsu, it's about driving that knowledge and turning it into skill, right? Wiring it into your nervous system so that your body gets used to it. So your body's then just going off of instinct rather than having to think. Because, like you said, if you're in the middle of an altercation, you don't have time to think about what was that move that they showed with the pressure point. Well,
which way do I grip?
Yeah, which one's right? It has to be instant.
Yeah.
It has to be instinct. And so that's why it's so important to, like, whether no matter what you're doing, if you're trained jiu-jitsu or whatever, like, I mean, it has to be continuous training because it has to be instinct. It can't be like a couple classes here and there and that it's somehow it's going to stick.
Right.
I mean, it's just like, even going back to the gun, like, you have like hordes of people buying their first firearms right now.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's going to sit on the shelf too. Like, it ain't going to get used. I'm like,
you got about a $450 paperweight.
That's right. I was like, so you bought this weapon, you don't train with it, you don't take it you don't practice drawing it, you don't take it to the range to shoot it, you don't do anything with it. It just sits there. Good luck if you ever actually have to use it, because it's probably not going to work for you.
Right.
Because you're not actually training with it. It's not automatic. It doesn't feel comfortable.
Yeah. Like carrying one without one in the chamber.
Right.
Pointless.
Yeah.
You got to be ready. You have to have all your tools ready to go, whether it be jiu-jitsu or, anything else. And if you don't take that seriously, you're like, well, these guys put on seminars every couple months. I'll go there. I'll learn what they're showing us. That's great. And they come in, they work hard. The guys that were there today, right now, probably could do what we showed them in the seminar. 3 weeks from now, probably can't. Aside from those that are going to go back home and seriously start training.
Yeah, and I was happy to see that a large number of them were training already.
Yeah.
Which is good, because that's like, that's the thing. It's like, I just know this, whenever it's like, think about it this way. Like, if you're doing something and someone comes from someone you don't know, who doesn't know you, comes at you and tells you you need to do something, even if they're right, your instant reaction is to to put up a wall, right? Yeah. But then if you have a friend that's very close to you that knows you, that knows you very well, and it's like, maybe in the similar conditions as to you in whatever it is that you're doing in life, if they say, hey, bro, and they tell you you need to probably do this, you're a little bit more receptive to it because you kind of trust their opinion. Yeah. And so it's good to see more, like I said, see these police officers training where, like, you guys can then, like you said, you guys started and they're doing it and they continue to spread the word, and then you hope that as time continues, more and more and more people will then see it, because they look around them and they say, well, these guys like just like you said, like a lot of the police officers that, with the exception of one, I think, have never drawn their weapon. Yeah. And the only reason the one drew his weapon and shot the guy was because the guy was literally shooting at bystanders. Yeah. I mean, he was shooting at people, and so he took a shot. Yeah. But other than that, everyone else has always been, we're able to control things, we don't have to take it to that next step. And I think it's just, if you're a police officer, I think it's just it's an important thing for you to do. And so for you guys, what you're doing with your mission, and then you see more people spreading it around, it's just one of those things where it's a positive thing, I think, for the job.
Yeah. So I love the number that we had there today. I think 24, 25 people, whatever it was. I was actually kind of discouraged that everyone had trained before. Because part of what we want, and this is actually the first seminar we've had that everyone has some level of jiu-jitsu experience. Part of why we want to make it law enforcement only is so for those that come in with absolutely no experience can kind of get past that first hurdle. We want to expose you to jiu-jitsu through these seminars. So while I was very thankful to have the turnout that we did, don't get me wrong, we enjoy having brand new people come in because that means we're exposing more officers to it. Everyone there today has been exposed to jiu-jitsu. Now, did they get a little bit better using jiu-jitsu specifically for the job today? I think so. I would hope so. Otherwise, we're pointless for being there. But if I can get somebody that is in the law enforcement field that has never done jiu-jitsu, get exposed to it, and then join a gym because of one of our seminars, that's an even bigger win, right? And that's going to make even more people better and more people successful because now they're going to go back and be like, hey, there's something to this stuff, guys. You should give it a try.
Well, there's some options now. You have like you could do seminars just for beginners only, or now you can split up classes.
Yeah.
Or split up your seminars. You have people that have trained or a little bit of, not say advanced, but people that have experience versus non-experience. So like you have the numbers now. It's a great thing. It means like what's going on is working. People are getting the message. My question is like for people that tell you they don't have time, or police officers say they're limited on time. Can you tell me a little bit about what's a typical like schedule for a police officer? I know it can be all over the place, but a typical maybe new police officer to the force, and then like how do you think would be the best way maybe to incorporate training? Would you have to get a facility maybe on the premises, like because I mean you could find a room with some small mat space.
So we'll go to the option of a new officer because they usually have the worst schedule, right? You're probably working second shift or third shift, which depending, like we do 4 10-hour shifts when you're on patrol. So our second shift is 4 p.m. to 2 a.m. and our third shift is 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. So those hours suck, especially for training. A lot of classes for adults are in the evening once everyone gets off work. So finding a gym that has a noon class, my coach, Michael Seals, he always has a noon class. So that kind of opens it up to people that can train during the day. And that's one thing that we did when we started the grappling club at work. We did it with that in mind. So one Tuesday we'll train from 1:30 to 3. The next Tuesday I think we do 6:30 to 8. So we can we're kind of taking away that, okay, you can't train this Tuesday, but you can train this Tuesday. And at least as far as starting, you may only be getting one day every other week, but you're getting exposed to it. And the more that you're learning just that, I think the more likely you are to join a gym that has afternoon classes or evening classes, depending on your schedule. And at the end of the day, like you still have days off. We're not working 7 days a week. Like you still have days off. Find a gym that offers something. A lot of times when I was on patrol, I had like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday off. So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday at noon, a great time for me to go train. My wife's at work. My daughter's in school. I can go put in a couple hours and not take away from family time, which is important in our field because it is limited based on our schedules. But if the rest of my family is already preoccupied and I can go train, then that's what I'm going to do. So it's just, if anyone wants to reach out to us, we have a lot of connections with gyms in the area. We can find gyms, and we've done it for other people. Even if you're not training with us, we just want you to train. And we'll find a gym that has classes that fits your work schedule. So just ask. There's resources out there, and we're more than happy to help you get them.
I'm curious. Do you have do you have any particular stories? Like I said, I talk to my students, and they have them stories where their jiu-jitsu came into play, where they were like, yeah, like this happened, and the jiu-jitsu took over, and I was able to do this, or the fighting stuff that we've done in the gym. Do you have any particular stories to share that maybe where you could see where your jiu-jitsu allowed you to be in complete control of the situation, and had you not had that, things could have taken a definite turn for the worse?
Yeah. So a couple years ago, right around Christmas time, I was a field training officer. I was training a newer officer. We get out with a couple people on a call, and the person that I'm interacting with while my partner was interacting with the other person, he takes off running. So we end up in a foot pursuit. I ended up tasing the guy. It got to that point as we were running. I felt like that was the best course of action. We weren't able to get him handcuffed while the taser was still in effect. So the second that taser 5 seconds ran out, he popped back up, started fighting again, took off running again. I ended up catching him, taking him down a second time, and ended up actually like in back control, right? I had his back, and we were okay, tussling around like, hey, man, stop, there's no point in this. And he was about 5'9", 200, so he about 50 pounds on me. Not a huge size discrepancy, but big enough that I was like, okay, I'm going to have to do something here. And I had seen him, so my partner had caught back up to us this point, and I saw the guy. I don't know if he realized he was reaching for my partner's taser or was just reaching to get away, but he kept grabbing at the taser, which is really bad news for us should they get that. So I, let go of my hook, and as he reached, actually used my hook to catch his arm, right, like we would do to apply like a rear naked choke, and eliminated that from the scenario.
Okay.
And that's one where then I ended up transitioning to side control and was talking to him like, he was like, hey man, it's over. He bit my leg, bit my thigh. And so at that point I started to let him think he was rolling over, right? How I talk about my being proactively reactive. I let him think he was coming up and going away. That's the direction I wanted him to go. And I already had my cuffs in hand and loaded up. So as he punches go through, I slid the one handcuff on. And then as he thought he was rolling back the other way, I slid the other handcuff on. Now, granted, he was handcuffed up front, not the most desired, not where we want it, but I'd already told him it was over. Now he's sitting there looking at his hands handcuffed and doesn't realize how that happened. Of course, I had called for backup and going back to slowing things down and controlling our mind. A couple of units had driven past us, so we were in a parking lot between two parked cars. So we're pretty concealed. But I had the wherewithal to realize while I'm fighting this guy, I'm like, hey, they just passed us, back up. We're between this gold minivan and this blue SUV, back up a couple of parking spots. You'll see us while I'm still fighting, because I put myself in that situation thousands of times where I'm on the ground. And that's one thing that I know Chris, Sam, and I like to do is as we're rolling in practice, as we're sparring, I like to look around and see who's doing what in the other groups. So I'm training my mind to be aware of my surroundings.
Interesting. And
using that scenario and training directly correlated to the job at that point. Because I'm like, hey, yeah, I'm over here. I'm still fighting him, but you passed us. They were able to back up. They came in, kind of took over. I walked away from the situation. They were again handcuffed in the back. And, like you said earlier, we got down to the jail and guys like, hey, man, sorry about all that.
Yeah.
And I was like, I get it. Like that's the game, if you will. Like it's your job to get away. It's my job to catch you. I said, if you're going to do it, just next time fight me like a man. Don't like bite my leg. Like if you want to fight, like I get that people are going to do that in my job. Yeah. People say it's what we signed up for. Don't bite me. Like there's a whole lot that comes with that. Luckily it was winter. So I had had
some layers on. I
had layers. No, it bruised, but because I had, thermals on under my work pants, like it didn't tear any material or break the skin, but it bruised. But, if that's the worst thing that happens, but again, being able to use my jiu-jitsu to keep him from, whether intentionally or incidentally, grabbing another officer's taser completely de-escalates that. And then using my jiu-jitsu to let him think he's winning that positional battle when really that's the way I want you to go, and be able to put the handcuffs on saved a whole lot more trouble from what it could have been.
Yeah, I remember Henzo he has a kind of like a little like documentary on him called Legacy. And in that documentary, he was talking about when he was a young guy, where he got into like an altercation with people, and they had weapons and stuff like that, and he just basically fought out of the situation and took control of it. And he kind of in his own way said that like, I'd never trained this, but because I trained jiu-jitsu, I was completely aware of where I was the whole time. Yeah. I was completely aware of what's going on around me. And I even think about most people in most gyms, like our gym gets really busy sometimes.
Right.
A big packed group. And I tell everybody, like, it is your job to be aware of where you are at all times, so you don't kick someone in the face like you did earlier to me.
Yeah. I apologize for that goose egg over your eye.
I'm just messing with you. No, that's been there since I was a kid. But no, like, you got to be aware, because you got to be aware, like, where am I at in space? Who's around me? and like I'm getting ready to go for a double leg takedown.
Right.
Ooh, there's someone right behind. I better spin it around, that kind of stuff. And so, it seems like these insignificant things, but then when you're in situations like that where you're in the middle of, wrestling with someone and you're completely aware of what's going on, and your body then becomes this tool where, like you said, the guy starts reaching for something. Instead of like having to think about a particular technique that was supposed to be there, you just understand, I need to trap that arm. Okay, I got my leg. I'll do that.
Yeah.
It's just you get to then improvise with what you've done, and it doesn't have to rely on some technique that you've got to remember.
And that comes back to the importance of training regularly.
Mm-hmm.
If you just take the back, and anyone can go out there and get on somebody's back and wrap their legs around their stomach and cross their feet.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't train taking the back and trapping that arm to better effectuate your choke time and time again, then come a real life situation, you're not going to be able to use your leg and trap their arm and prevent them from doing something else. I wasn't going for a rear naked choke. We can't do that. But I'm going to use it as a control tactic.
Mm-hmm.
And if I haven't trained that and put myself in that position time and time again, then that's not an option.
Yeah, it's pretty well like it's dialed in at that point. Like you're pretty much looking around and you're doing stuff without conscious thought. Like
right.
you're like we're always, like Chewy said, the gym gets busy and you're knowing what belt level is next to you. Do I need to get out of the way, or do I need to ask them to move? Like
it's a difference. If you got 2 brown belts or black belts rolling next to you, you're like, they're going to stay in that 5-foot circle. If you got 2 brand new people, you're like, yeah.
And just without even thinking about it, like we do it instinctually now. And so that's just such a great point, just to being aware, like, what your hands are doing, what you're controlling, and then you're aware of your surroundings. Somebody else comes on you. I mean, that's just really, that just shows proficiency in what you're doing. And I think that, like I said, it takes time, repetition, just constantly being in these situations. That's the only way. That's the only way to get to a level where it's going to be effective. People might go to one of your seminars and they're like, oh well, jiu-jitsu didn't work for me, because they never did that ever again. Yeah. Like, you have to practice. You have to think about it. You have to visualize yourself doing it. I mean, there's some other things you can do, but you just have to be in that headspace.
Yeah, and I equate that to any skill on the job. I remember the first traffic stop I ever made on my own. I had no intention of writing a ticket. I just wanted to start making myself comfortable. I'm out on my own for the first time, right? I've either been in the academy or I've had a training officer with me, and I pulled this lady over for speeding, and I don't remember how fast she was going to ride, but I knew I wasn't going to write a ticket, right? It was just to start making myself comfortable. I walked up to that car shaking, right? Because it's uncharted territory.
Well, that's a dangerous position for you guys, like the traffic stops.
It's one of the most dangerous things that we do.
Like, it can be a dangerous situation.
It can be. Absolutely, it can be. And so, that's going through my mind, and the fact that just I don't know what I'm doing on my own yet, right? And it can be like that going to your first board meeting at a job. Like, you're going to have some nerves. But now I've made more traffic stops than I could even begin to count my life, and I've understood I've got to be aware, but I can't be too.
Did you write a ticket that first one?
No, I couldn't. My hand was shaking so hard I wouldn't be able to put pen on paper.
I wasn't sure if she was like stupid pig or something like that. Then you were like, all right, I'm gonna write the ticket.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
No, that one. That's one of the ones I do remember.
Ask Chewy how to not get out of a ticket.
How do you not get out of a ticket?
How did I not get out of a ticket? You say that to the police officer.
What's that? I was I've never said that to a police officer.
No, you shouldn't say it to anybody. It makes you realize, like, the fact that you're saying that makes you realize that we're all human.
Yeah,
we're all like nervous. Like, we're all kind of like in these situations. They're tense, not just for the person being arrested, but they're tense for the police officer. Like,
absolutely.
Like, we're all human. We all want to go home safely.
Yeah.
Again, that situation can go many ways, but like, just again, knowing where you're at, what you're doing, and again, that's probably the best way to make it safe for everybody around, just being cool and calm and collected.
It is. And look, I'm not going to pretend that every police officer out there is perfect and makes good decisions. That would be insane for me to sit here and say, because we know that that's not true. Most of us are, and we're out there for the right reasons. And most police officers really don't enjoy arresting people. Like, it's a necessary evil of the job. Like, I don't want to take away your freedoms. I don't want to take away your liberties like that we have. Like, we're taking away constitutional rights from people. And that's not the enjoyable part of the job. That's why very, very few of us got into the job, was to just wake up and be like, oh, I'm going to go arrest 5 people today. Like, that's not what it's about.
Right.
Sometimes that happens based on decisions that people make. Unfortunately, sometimes our hands are tied and we then have to respond to those decisions. But I promise, a police officer wakes up and is like, I'm going to go arrest Chewy today. Like, we don't wake up with that mindset. Like, we're going to wake up and go arrest somebody. We understand that that's a possibility, but that's not what we're in it for.
Yeah. Like I said, like the like 99.9% of you guys are good dudes. And it's just unfortunate where you see either due to like a poor lack of training, or, just because of who that person is, and they probably should have never been doing the job.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where it's like, it sucks because it ruins the situation. It's like, when you look at, because there are cases where, like, even me, I don't hate police officers, but then there's cases where I see him and I'm like, ooh, dude, that's a hard one to watch because there's a lot of video of it.
I've had those. I've had that.
Yeah, right. I talk to my police friends, and like we talk about them. It's like, it's hard to watch sometimes because you're like, dude, what are you doing? With some of these cases. But it's the same thing with like a surgeon. Like I don't. There's surgeons that do terrible things, and people die because of them. I don't look at all surgeons as terrible people.
Right.
It's one of those things where, it's just, there cannot be, it's life. There cannot be 100% perfection of anything, right? There's always going to be problems. There's always going to be issues. But again, I think that it's important for, guys like you that are within this whole situation to do what you're doing, which is, trying to make a difference, trying to improve, trying to make things better. I think that's the biggest thing. And I think that it's good for other people that are on the outside to support people like you guys, because again, it's so hard for someone like me, for instance. Yeah. I don't know what you guys deal with. Like, one of my students, he comes into the class sometimes and he'll tell me about these things that he deals with. And I'm like, bro, you're dealing with the underbelly of society. Like, you came into a home where you had to bust down the door. You saw a woman and a child bloodied and bruised and beaten by this scum of the earth guy. And you had to go in there and arrest this dude. Right. And that was your morning. And now you're coming to training. Like that was what you just got done dealing with. Like, I cannot imagine having to deal with anything like that. You're dealing with children, right? I can't imagine dealing with it. And so I think that it frustrates me because there's like, I think it's something with our society as a whole is the lack of empathy, right? Because it's like, for instance, for me, like, a lot of times I try to look at things and say, what are you going through?
Right.
Not me, not what am I experiencing, but what are you going through based on your subjective reality, and trying to sort of put myself in your shoes at least a little bit before I try to pass judgment on you as a person, because again, every one of us is going through a different experience. And I think that empathy towards other people and what they're going through is just, it's a powerful tool that could be used to allow the space there to sort of meet in the middle somewhere. Yeah.
So, and one other thing people don't realize is, like, you talk about your students, as I dealt with this morning, now I'm coming in here training, is probably what actually happened is say that student saw this girl and her child bloody and beaten, and whether he fights or doesn't fight the suspect, but he's now dealing with this really bad trauma to this child and this mother. And then the call after that, after he's amped up and he's going through this emotional, every call we go on in that instance has some kind of emotional distress on us. A lot of people won't admit that.
Well, nobody calls you guys like, hey guys, I just wanted to like have you stop by for some coffee and a cake or something.
Right. Usually if we encounter people, it's the worst moment of their life.
Yes.
Right? So, you come from a really, really nasty domestic, and your very next call, maybe someone, I left my car unlocked last night and they stole the change out of my cup holder. So you're dealing with this emotional distress. Now you've got to keep in check. Now, this call for the change stolen cup holder is no less traumatic for this person than the call you just dealt with. You're still psychologically dealing with this. And now you've got to go present a whole different attitude to this. And then while you're doing that, and I've had this happen, I've gone from this to that, and all of a sudden an armed robbery comes out across the street, and you're like, sorry, now I got to go deal with it. So it's the up and down that really takes a toll on people. And tying it back to training, I think, a lot of times my best hour or 2 hours a day is when I'm on the mat, because I'm completely decompressing. I'm not thinking about anything. I don't think about anything. As hard as we train and as hard as sparring matches can be, there's not a thought going through my head. Yeah. And it's a really good release for folks.
Paul, man, what you guys deal with on an everyday basis is like traumatic, right? Like, we talked about like physically handling this trauma, physically handling, how do you guys mentally handle like traumatic experiences? Because man, like, we're all human. There's PTSD, that shit's real. Like, there's probably a stigma behind it because you're supposed to be this police officer that's kind of got it put together and you're completely like supposed to be level-headed. But like, how do you deal with like just constantly seeing like these terrible things, and you deal with children, and you're a father and I'm a father. Like, how do you address those things to be sure you're at your best?
I'm really glad you asked that. So what doesn't go in the news is annually more officers commit suicide than are killed in the line of duty. More officers kill themselves every year than are killed on assaults. And so it's very important to handle these mental issues that we have as we handle these calls. A lot of agencies have chaplain services, and I think that's a very big part for folks that are religious. Whether it's church support groups, peer support groups. We have a unit in our department that goes out to what we call critical incidents, whatever, whether it's officer-involved shootings or, if we see something abnormally gory, even like by our standards, those units will come out and they offer peer support. For me, jiu-jitsu is my escape, mentally and physically. Like, that is my therapy. I've gone to therapy. I've gone and talked to somebody before. When I've been having trouble, I'm like, hey, I've got some stuff going on and I just feel like I need to get it out. And I found a therapist in Lexington who is a former police officer and specializes in first responder trauma. And that did the world for me. And I'm comfortable talking about that, and again, maybe that's the ego. Maybe it's, coming back to the individual sport. Like, I'm okay with expressing what I think can help somebody else. And, there's a lot of different avenues. And if you are listening to this and going through something, just find one of those avenues, like reach out to somebody, be a good beat partner. There's times I've gone to my beat partner. I'm like, hey man, I'm concerned about you, whether you want to admit it or not. I'm here for you, or here's who I've gone and talked to. Like, if you just need to let something out, if you need to cry, like, just come over to the house, man. And, people want officers to hold other officers accountable, which we do for all realms, whether it be something that we see that they're doing that's not okay on duty, or if we see, hey, you look like you're going through some stuff. Come and chat, So you just got to find the right avenue for you, I guess.
It's interesting because I was talking to one of my students about this recently. Just he's not a police officer, but just he's a young guy, and I was talking to him. I was like, it's funny how when someone shows vulnerability, when they show a flaw, when they show something that they're going through, in most cases we look at that person like, wow, look at how strong they are for showing that side of themselves. Look at how strong they are for exposing that vulnerability to other people. But then when we do it ourselves, we feel like we're weak about it.
Right.
It's a very strange dichotomy, because it's like we understand that, basically owning that thing, bringing it to the surface and owning it is a powerful thing that shows strength. But then when we do it ourselves, we feel like we're almost being weak or being a baby or being whatever. And so I think that's important, like you said, that you shared that so that if there is a police officer watching is going through something, or hell, even if you're not a police officer, if you're just going through something, man, like it's fine. Like I have a psychologist in the gym, it's like, again, he's there and that's what he does with people, right? Yeah. Like it's good to see if you need it. That's what it's there for.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a stigma behind mental health. I mean, like there is because like if like you're seen as, maybe some people see, oh, that's very important that you're doing that, but some people might see as weak or unstable, but like it's just like anything. Like you have a heart problem, you go to a cardiologist.
Absolutely.
You have a muscle issue or pain, you go to a physical therapist or whatever. Like if you have issues with your mental well-being, you need to address that, because that's just going to turn into something that's going to eat you up, and it could cause a when you get in a really stressful situation, it could cause, something traumatic to happen that maybe, normally wouldn't. So, I mean, that's powerful, man. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I think more, I think showing vulnerability in a way, it's important. It shows that, like, man, cops are human.
I talked about no officer wakes up every day and is like, hey, I'm going to go arrest somebody.
Yeah.
We definitely don't wake up like, I might get in a deadly force situation today. No officer ever wants to be in that. That's absolutely worst case scenario for us. I've been fortunate that I've been in this job 11 years and I've never had to fire my weapon. That's a good
incredible,
thing.
man.
It's a good thing, and I hope I never have to. I've had some close encounters, and some of them my training has helped me, and some of them I've just realized what I initially perceived, and again, probably because of my training, I've been able to slow everything down, and what I've initially perceived isn't actually what's going on. We've been able to back down from there. So, I've worked with a lot of good people that have been there along the way too, that have been in those same situations with me, and we've been able to work together and either talk people down or realize the situation's not what it is.
Yeah, I mean, it's the power of jiu-jitsu, honestly.
Yeah.
It's more important. I mean, it just shows how important it is. I mean, for everyone,
Yeah.
for the police officer or not, it's important, like,
Yep.
You want to defend yourself or your family.
Yeah.
Like, you should definitely know a little bit about how to do that, without a weapon involved. Most people probably don't carry weapons, but like just being able to, get your shoulders back and walk tall, like down the street, not being terrified. As a
confident encounter.
As a young kid, I was like, and Chewy's got experience as well as that he's shared, but like as a young kid, my brother got just jumped and got his eye socket broken, his orbital bone broken. I was like terrified and I didn't know what it was.
Right.
I'd be scared walking down the street all the time, but like, and I got into jiu-jitsu and I realized, this was years later. I was in my mid-20s and just like, and it was for a totally different reason, but I realized I wasn't as fearful of a person. Like I felt like I could, wasn't as scared to even be in an encounter. I think I've been in less encounters just because I don't put off that like scared vibe, that scared, energy.
Yeah. That's kind of what we very first started talking about. If you are averting eye contact and you're giving out that weak persona, you might get picked on a little bit more.
Yeah, for
which
sure.
is going to lead you to get more fights, not because you want to, be at that point because you've become a target, and people are going to start poking the bear.
All right, awesome, Paul. So people want to get a hold of you guys, see what you're all about, get a seminar scheduled, learn from you, what you guys have going on. Where can they go?
Yep. So our website is www.bluejitsulexington.com. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram at Blue Jitsu Lexington. Please feel free to message us. We want to get these seminars out there. We want to get the word out there about jiu-jitsu and how it can be effective. So reach out to us with any questions you guys have. And Chewy, I want to thank you again for having us out today.
Appreciate you guys doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Paul.
Yep. Thank you, guys.
All right, guys. So that is a wrap. I hope you guys enjoyed the podcast. Hopefully that, gave you some perspectives and things like that coming from a police officer. Because I know in today's time and the way that society is, it's a crazy time for police officers and the perception of them and everything else. And so again, I was happy to support them to try to, again, allow them to try to help make a difference in their community, which again, I hope that they're able to continue to do that project and run that program to expose more and more officers to training and get them training consistently. So again, hopefully that was useful to you in some way, gave you some sort of perspective idea that is useful to you. So again, with that said, guys, big thanks to Charlotte's Web for helping make the podcast happen. If you want to check them out, go to charlottesweb.com. Promo code is Jiu-Jitsu, 15% off. Epic Roll BJJ, all kinds of epic Jiu-Jitsu gear, 15% off with the promo code Jiu-Jitsu. If you guys want to jump into our Patreon and support the podcast directly, you can go to patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast, along with all the content that we have available for the from the podcast and from videos and stuff like that I do. You also have the option to jump in and do the live Zoom. I call them Zoom calls. It's basically just, I call it the hangout. Like we just hang out on Sundays. So if you guys want to hang out with me on Sundays and chat for a little bit, sometimes in the evening, sometimes in the morning, check that out. And then, that's it.
Yeah, and if you're a Patreon member in November, at the end of November, we're going to do a little raffle, and then somebody will get some Charlotte's Web CBD, whether it's gummies or a tincture. We'll figure out what that is, but you have to be a Patreon subscriber in November to get that.
Okay.
And then also Matt's working on some cool Jiu-Jitsu podcast gear specifically for us. We should have some samples. We'll show those off to you guys, see what y'all think.
Awesome. So by the way, if you with the CBD, you have to be in a place where it's legal.
Yes.
Because I know that there's some places not legal.
Australia.
Good day, mate.
I'm not even gonna try. That's all I got.
My Australian kind of goes back and forth between sort of like a weird British.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I was about to do something else, but it's not going to be good because now I'm going back to say it's not quite Australian.
I've got good Russian accent.
Well, it's because you're Russian. You grew up there. You're like you left when you're like 7 or something, right?
6. 5. I had a birthday in Italy actually. So
5 in Italy.
Yeah, that's what happens. Well traveled, Chewy.
Yeah, you're well traveled.
Rob's over here cleaning.
Rob's over here.
We're still doing an outro. He's cleaning.
I'm doing the outro, so I had to turn him off. He's over here desanitizing the microphone.
Wait, desanitizing or sanitizing?
Sanitizing.
So he's making it dirtier.
He's coughing all over it. All right,
Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll see you next time.